The clock ticked mercilessly, each second echoing in Mira's ears like a drumbeat of destiny. At 24, she was confident, sharp-witted, and known for her fiery temper, qualities that had both drawn people to her and caused them headaches. Today, however, every bit of her confidence was being tested in ways she had never imagined. Standing at the edge of the grand wedding hall, she clutched the delicate lace of her wedding gown and stared at the crowd. Her heart raced. In less than an hour, she would walk down the aisle, declaring her love and loyalty to Samir, a man she had chosen out of love, but a man whose family had never truly accepted her. She glanced at Samir, who stood at the altar, smiling nervously, unaware of the storm about to hit. His family, the Kapoor clan, were sitting stiffly in their seats, whispers and disapproving glances floating through the air like poison arrows. The tension was palpable. Mira's mother had warned her, "Don't let them get under your skin," but Mira wasn't sure she could remain calm if the sharp, judgmental remarks began again. Her palms sweated, her mind raced. Should she confront the humiliation head-on, or swallow it all silently and hope for peace? What would it cost her if she dared to speak the truth? And, more importantly, what if saying nothing allowed something irreversible to happen? These thoughts collided in her mind, leaving her paralyzed for a heartbeat. Then she took a deep breath and stepped forward. This was her moment, the point where a single choice could either define her dignity or shatter it forever. Could she rise above the petty cruelty around her, or would her temper lead to chaos? And if chaos erupted, who would pay the price first? The sunlight streamed through the crystal chandeliers, scattering rainbows across the polished marble floor of the grand wedding hall. The air smelled of fresh flowers, roses, lilies, and jasmine, and the delicate fragrance mingled with the faint, nervous sweat of the guests. The chatter of relatives, polite laughter, and the soft tinkle of glasses created a background hum that barely masked the tension in the room. Mira's eyes scanned the crowd, noting every wrinkle of suspicion, every frown and smirk. She noticed her father's anxious hands clutching the arms of his chair, the tremor in her younger brother's voice as he whispered a joke to calm his nerves, and the faint frown on Samir's face, betraying his unease. Every detail sharpened her resolve. Then she noticed something unusual, a soft, almost imperceptible glance between Samir's cousin, Ria, and one of the family elders. There was a flicker of recognition, a hint of a secret being shared silently. Her intuition, honed from years of reading people, whispered that this was not a simple family disagreement, it was something deeper. Mira's eyes narrowed. Could this wedding be about more than just alliances and social expectations? Could someone have a hidden agenda? The music swelled as the first notes of the wedding march began, and Mira felt the gown's heavy fabric drag behind her like a warning. Her mind was a whirl of emotions, anger, fear, curiosity, and determination. She had worked too hard, fought too many silent battles, and endured too many sneers to let today be stolen by humiliation. Her bold decision crystallized in an instant. She would not bow to ridicule. She would confront the cold glances, the whispered judgments, and the subtle manipulations head-on, but she would do so elegantly, with fire hidden beneath a calm exterior. As she walked down the aisle, heads turned, and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mira held her chin high, her eyes fixed on Samir, and yet every step brought her closer to a revelation she was not prepared for. Halfway down, she caught sight of a small envelope clutched tightly in the hand of the wedding coordinator, someone who had been hovering silently near the entrance. The envelope had the Kapoor family emblem stamped on it, a symbol Mira recognized immediately. Curiosity gnawed at her. She veered slightly, her trained gaze scanning the room, and for a fleeting second, their eyes met. She knew instantly, whatever was inside that envelope could change everything, maybe even destroy the delicate facade of this perfect wedding. Should she ignore it and focus on her own dignity, or seize the chance to uncover the truth that everyone else seemed desperate to hide? The music swelled, and the tension snapped. A soft gasp rose from one corner of the hall. Mira paused, her heart hammering. Something had been revealed, but what? And as she lifted her hand toward the envelope, a shadow fell across the aisle. It was Samir's father, his face a mask of control and calculation. His eyes locked onto hers, and in that instant, the unspoken warning was clear: some truths were not meant to be uncovered. Yet Mira, fierce and unyielding, had made her choice. She would not let fear dictate her life, not today, not ever. Her bold action was about to ripple through the hall like a storm about to break. She reached for the envelope, feeling the weight of the moment pressing against her chest, and the air seemed to thicken, charged with anticipation. Would she open it in front of everyone, exposing the hidden truth and humiliating the Kapoor family as she had feared, or would she wait, letting the secret fester in silence, risking a much darker outcome? Could she trust her instincts, or would the consequences of her courage be more devastating than any humiliation she had endured? And most importantly, was she ready to face what lay inside, knowing it could change her life and everyone else's forever? The golden sunlight reflected off the crystal chandeliers, bathing the wedding hall in a glow that made every pearl on Mira's gown sparkle. The music still played softly in the background, but the atmosphere had shifted. Murmurs ran like ripples across the crowd, and a few guests exchanged nervous glances. Something unseen had stirred the air, and Mira could feel it in her bones. She held the envelope delicately, its edges crisp, the Kapoor family emblem glaring back at her like a warning. Her fingers trembled, not with fear, but with anticipation. The truth inside the small paper could unravel everything. Sameer's eyes followed her every move, confusion and worry mingling in his gaze. He whispered, "Mira, what are you doing?" She bent slightly, lowering her voice but keeping her tone firm. "I need to know, Sameer. I can't marry under lies, not today." Sameer's mouth opened, then closed, as if words failed him. The people around them seemed to fade into a blur. Mira's heart pounded. In that moment, she realized that bravery didn't mean the absence of fear, it meant acting despite it. With a swift movement, she tore the envelope open. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper, neatly folded, the ink black and official. Her eyes scanned the words, and the world around her seemed to stop. It was a letter, written in the hand of a lawyer representing the Kapoor family. It outlined a hidden condition of the marriage, a clause that had been deliberately kept from her. If the marriage proceeded, Mira would be stripped of any claim to family wealth, and Sameer would be coerced into signing over his share of his inheritance to the Kapoor family trust. The letter went on to reveal a more shocking truth: certain members of Sameer's family had actively tried to sabotage the engagement, creating situations to humiliate Mira, testing her patience, and even planting stories to make her look unworthy. Her hands tightened around the envelope. Every word burned her. The humiliation she had feared, the whispered judgments, the cold stares, it was all part of a calculated plan. She looked at Sameer, whose face had turned pale, his lips quivering. They were testing me," he stammered. "Yes," Mira said, her voice low and steady, though fury simmered beneath the surface. "And I just found out the truth. Everything, they lied about everything." The crowd had begun to notice the tension, whispers growing louder. Mira's boldness had shifted the entire atmosphere. The music stopped abruptly, replaced by murmurs and the faint rustle of movement. Some guests were frowning, some were whispering frantically into phones. The wedding hall, which had been a symbol of celebration, now felt like a stage set for a confrontation. Mira raised her head, scanning the room. She saw the subtle panic in the eyes of Sameer's father, the rigid composure of the aunt who had been so cruel in earlier conversations, and the quiet shock on the faces of distant relatives who had only heard fragments of what was happening. Every detail confirmed her suspicion. She held power in that moment, the power to expose the truth or to walk away with her dignity intact. Her mind raced. If she acted boldly, she could turn the tables, humiliate the very people who had humiliated her. But what if it backfired? What if Sameer's family rejected her outright? What if she lost him forever? And yet, staying silent felt impossible. Her pride, her sense of justice, and her love for Sameer demanded action. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, holding the letter up for the audience to see. "Everyone," she said, her voice ringing clear, cutting through the murmurs. "I think it's time the truth is out." Gasps erupted across the hall. Some guests leaned forward, trying to catch every word, while others recoiled as if the air itself had become dangerous. Sameer's father's face went ashen. "Mira, you shouldn't," he began, but she cut him off with a glance sharp enough to silence him. "I won't marry under lies," Mira continued, her voice unwavering. "I won't accept humiliation dressed as tradition. This letter proves it. The games, the manipulations, the whispers behind my back, none of it will define me today." A tense silence followed. Then, like a dam breaking, chaos erupted. Some of Samir's relatives shouted, accusing her of overreacting. Others whispered behind their hands, confused and scared. Samir's eyes were wide, torn between shock and awe. "Mira," he whispered again. What do we do now?" Mira's resolve did not waver. She folded the letter neatly, tucking it back into the envelope. "We do what we should have done from the start," she said, voice firm and commanding. "We stand up. We don't let lies rule our lives. Today, I choose honesty. I choose respect. And I choose dignity." The guests' reactions were a mix of fear, admiration, and disbelief. Some were silent, frozen by the sheer audacity of her act. Others whispered behind fans, already plotting how this revelation would ripple through the family networks. One thing was certain: the dynamics of this wedding, of this family, had shifted irreversibly. Then, unexpectedly, Samir's younger cousin, Ria, the one who had exchanged a secret glance earlier, stepped forward. Her face was pale, but her voice carried a mixture of fear and defiance. You have no idea what's really coming," she said, her eyes darting to the elders. "This isn't just about wealth or pride. This is bigger than all of us." Mira felt a chill run down her spine. She had uncovered part of the truth, but the words of the young woman hinted at something deeper, something dangerous. Could this wedding have been the surface of a much larger plan? And if so, who was truly behind it? The music began again, but this time it was discordant, a harsh contrast to the elegance of the hall. The air seemed to thicken, filled with tension and unspoken threats. Mira looked at Samir, saw the fear in his eyes, and knew that her next choice would not only affect their marriage but could also determine the course of the family's future. She clenched her fists, heart pounding. Would she confront the hidden forces manipulating their lives, or would she retreat, risking the chance to protect herself and Samir from future betrayal? Could she trust anyone in this room, or was everyone playing a part in a web of deceit far more tangled than she could imagine? And as she lifted her gaze to meet the stern eyes of Samir's father, the room seemed to hold its breath. One choice, one word, one act of courage, and everything could change. The question was, would the truth be enough to survive the storm that was coming? The grand wedding hall, once a place of laughter and celebration, had transformed into a stage for tension and unspoken conflict. Guests shifted in their seats, whispering rapidly, trying to piece together the shock of the moment. The chandeliers reflected fractured light across the marble floor, as if the hall itself sensed the storm about to break. Mira stood tall, her grip on the envelope tight, her gaze unwavering. Samir's hand found hers, squeezing it with silent support, though his eyes betrayed a storm of uncertainty. "Are you sure about this, Mira?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the rising murmurs. "I have to be," she replied, her tone firm, almost cold. "I can't let lies and manipulation become the foundation of my life." The words had barely left her lips when a voice cut through the murmurs. It was Ria, Samir's cousin, stepping forward once again. Her face was pale, almost ghostly, but her eyes burned with intensity. "If you think revealing that letter will end this, you have no idea what you've stepped into," she warned. Mira frowned. "What do you mean? What else is there?" Ria hesitated, glancing nervously at the elders. "There are things you can't see yet. This family, my family, they've been hiding secrets for years. Lies, betrayals, even crimes that most people would never imagine. That letter, it's just the tip of the iceberg." A hush fell over the hall. Guests froze, sensing that the drama had escalated far beyond a family feud or a wedding dispute. Some whispered prayers, others gasped openly, and a few even reached for their phones, anticipating that this story might be shared instantly. Samir pulled Mira closer. "Secrets? What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice tense. "You're scaring me." "I'm not the one scaring you," Ria said sharply, her voice trembling. "You just don't realize the kind of people you're dealing with. And Mira, now that you've opened that letter, you've stirred forces that don't forgive easily." Mira's mind raced. She had expected resistance, but she had not imagined danger, not like this. Something about Ria's words felt like a warning, not a threat, a warning that if she made the wrong move next, the consequences could be disastrous. Yet, she couldn't back down. Her pride, her sense of justice, and her desire to protect Samir pushed her forward. Determined, she straightened her shoulders. Then tell me. Tell me everything. I need to know, Ria. If there's danger, if there are secrets. I need to face them now, not later. Ria glanced at Samir, then back at Mira, as if deciding whether to trust her. Finally, she whispered, "There's a private room behind the east wing, where only the elders meet. If you go there, you'll see the truth for yourself. But I warn you, once you see it, nothing will ever be the same." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud, and Mira's pulse quickened. A hidden room. Hidden truths. The thought that the Kapoor family was hiding something monumental, right under everyone's noses, sent a shiver down her spine. She glanced at Samir. He looked torn, afraid of the consequences but unwilling to let her face danger alone. "I'll go," Mira said, determination hardening her voice. "I need to know. I can't marry into lies, and I can't live with secrets hiding in the shadows." Ria nodded solemnly and led them toward the east wing. As they moved through the hall, whispers followed them, eyes tracking their every step. The grandeur of the wedding seemed to fade with each step, replaced by an oppressive sense of secrecy and tension. The private room was small, dimly lit, and heavily secured. A faint scent of old paper and incense lingered in the air. Mira felt a chill as she stepped inside, her eyes scanning the walls lined with shelves, each filled with folders and documents. Her intuition screamed that this was where the real secrets were kept. Ria handed her a folder, thick with papers. "Everything you need is here," she said softly. "Just, be careful. Once you read this, you can't unsee it." Mira's fingers trembled as she opened the folder. The first document detailed financial manipulations, forged contracts, and secret transfers of wealth. Her eyes widened in shock. These were schemes even the most cunning corporate minds would envy. But it wasn't just money. There were personal secrets, hidden relationships, betrayals within the family, and evidence of deliberate sabotage against anyone who defied them. Her mind reeled. The humiliation at the wedding, the whispered insults, the judgmental glances, they were all part of a calculated pattern. This wasn't just a family testing her, it was a machine built to control, to dominate, and to erase anyone who didn't conform. Samir's hand found hers again, grounding her. "We can't let this continue," he whispered. "We need to stop them." "But, how?" Mira's eyes scanned the documents, her mind spinning with strategy and consequence. She realized that any misstep could destroy not only her relationship but also expose her and Samir to the full wrath of the Kapoor family. Yet the thought of surrendering, of letting them continue their manipulations, was unbearable. "We expose them," she said, voice firm, though her heart raced. "We don't let them hide in shadows. We take control, and we show everyone the truth." Ria shook her head. "You don't understand. If you do that, they will fight back. Hard. And they won't care who gets hurt in the process." Mira's jaw tightened. Fear was there, of course it was, but determination burned brighter. "Then we fight smart," she said. "We use what we know. We plan carefully. And we make sure justice is served." A sudden noise from the hall made them both freeze. Footsteps. Heavy, purposeful. Someone was coming, someone who could catch them in the act. Mira's pulse thundered in her ears. She glanced at Ria, who whispered, "They're coming. Quickly, hide the folder." Mira's heart raced as she slid the documents into a hidden compartment behind a loose panel in the wall. The footsteps grew louder, echoing ominously through the corridor. Mira pressed herself against the wall, holding her breath, her mind calculating the next move. The door creaked open, and a stern voice called out, "Ria? Samir?" Ria's eyes widened in panic. "Hide. Now." As they ducked behind a large wooden screen, Mira realized one truth: the Kapoor family's power was far greater than she had imagined. Every decision from this moment forward would require courage, intelligence, and nerve. One wrong move could unravel everything. And yet, she would not back down. Not now. Not ever. The footsteps faded as the person moved on, but the tension did not. Mira knew the first move had been made, and the first secret uncovered, but the real battle was only beginning. Would she have the strength and wisdom to navigate the dangerous waters of family betrayal, deception, and hidden agendas? Could she protect Samir while exposing the Kapoor family, or would the forces arrayed against them prove too strong? The answers were uncertain. But one thing was clear: nothing would ever be the same after today. The wedding hall had regained a fragile sense of normalcy, but the air was thick with unease. Guests whispered among themselves, exchanging glances heavy with suspicion. The laughter and chatter felt forced, artificial, a thin veneer over the tension that had erupted moments earlier. Mira and Samir returned to their seats, trying to blend into the crowd, but every fiber of Mira's being was alert. She knew the moment they had uncovered the secrets, the rules of the game had changed. She could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on them. Some curious, some judgmental, and others calculating. The Kapoor family elders sat in rigid silence, their faces masks of control, though Mira noticed flickers of unease in their eyes. For the first time, the illusion of perfect authority had cracks. Ria leaned close to Mira. "You need to be careful," she whispered. "They've been controlling everything behind closed doors for years. They've ruined careers, marriages, reputations. They don't forgive easily." "I know," Mira replied, her voice barely audible. "But they can't scare me. Not today." Samir, however, was less certain. His jaw was tense, and his hands fidgeted with the cuff of his suit. "Mira, maybe we should just forget this. Pretend nothing happened. The wedding can continue. Maybe it's safer." Mira turned to him, her eyes blazing. "Safer? We've seen what they're capable of. If we stay silent, we become part of their control. Samir, I can't marry under lies. I won't." Before he could respond, a commotion erupted near the entrance of the hall. The doors swung open, and one of the elder relatives, Mr. Kapoor, stepped in, his face pale, hands trembling slightly, a rare crack in his usual composure. The guests fell silent immediately. I need to speak," he said, his voice unsteady. "There have been revelations today. And some things need to be addressed." Mira's eyes narrowed. This was the moment. She had expected confrontation, but not a voluntary acknowledgement from the head of the family. Could he be scared? Could the carefully hidden conspiracies finally be unraveling? He cleared his throat and continued, "It appears that someone has discovered information that was meant to remain private. Secrets that were carefully guarded." His gaze flicked to Mira and Samir. "And now, we must consider how to proceed." Ria shot Mira a look of warning. "Careful," she whispered. "He's setting the stage. Every word is calculated." But Mira remained composed. She stepped forward, her gown brushing the marble floor, her voice calm but firm. "Mr. Kapoor, enough games. The wedding cannot continue under lies. You have humiliated me, tested me, and plotted behind my back. But the truth is out now. We know about the letters, the plans, the manipulations. And it's time someone answers for them." The hall erupted in murmurs. Some gasped audibly, others whispered rapidly into their phones. Samir's father stiffened, his fingers tightening around the arms of his chair. For the first time, the carefully curated facade of power began to crumble. Mr. Kapoor's voice rose, sharp and controlled, though Mira detected the tremor beneath it. "Do you understand what you are saying? You are accusing your husband's family on your wedding day?" "Yes," Mira said firmly. "Because the truth matters more than tradition, more than appearances. If we marry under lies, we accept a life of control and deception. I will not do that." The tension in the room was palpable. Guests leaned forward in their seats, some horrified, some thrilled, all captivated. Even Samir looked stunned, torn between loyalty to his family and awe at Mira's courage. Then, from the corner of the hall, Ria stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. "It's true. The family has been manipulating people, destroying reputations, hiding crimes. Mira is right. The truth cannot stay hidden. A gasp ran through the room. Eyes widened, and a few guests murmured, could this really be true? The carefully constructed social order of the wedding was collapsing, and no one knew how far the revelations would reach. Mr. Kapoor's face hardened. He had been a master of control for decades, but now, faced with exposure, his confidence wavered. This cannot continue, he said sharply. There are consequences to speaking out. Mira took a deep breath, feeling the power of the moment. She knew what she had to do next. Then face the consequences. Because today, the truth matters more than your power. Today, we take back what you've tried to hide. The room fell into an uneasy silence. Guests were frozen, unsure how to react. Some families whispered frantically, others exchanged worried glances. Mira could feel the tension as a living thing, thick and suffocating, wrapping around every person present. Suddenly, a sharp sound broke the stillness. The wedding coordinator dropped a tray of glasses. Everyone jumped. The sound seemed to punctuate the growing chaos, as if the universe itself had marked this as the turning point. Mira's gaze flicked to Samir. We have to act now, she whispered. If we wait, they'll recover. If we wait, the power they hold over us could destroy everything. Samir nodded, his fear giving way to determination. What do we do? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mira's eyes hardened. We gather proof. We expose them. And we make sure everyone knows the truth before they can hide again. A sudden thought struck her. What if the Kapoor family had anticipated this? What if the documents she and Riya had found were only part of the story, a distraction from something even more dangerous? The possibility made her stomach churn. But there was no turning back. She had already taken the first step. Now, she had to follow through. The wedding hall, once a symbol of celebration, now felt like a battlefield. Every smile, every polite nod, every whispered greeting was a calculated move in a war she had been forced into. And she knew the next few hours could change lives forever. Could she and Samir uncover the full truth before it was too late? Would the Kapoor family strike back to protect their secrets? And what hidden forces might be waiting just beyond the doors, ready to ensure that the deception continues at any cost? The answers were unknown, and the tension was electric. One thing was certain, nothing in this wedding, or in their lives, would ever be the same again. The wedding hall had become a pressure cooker of secrets, tension, and unspoken threats. Guests sat rigidly in their seats, unsure whether to flee, intervene, or simply watch the drama unfold. The once bright chandeliers now cast sharp, almost accusing shadows across the marble floors. Every whisper carried weight, every glance seemed loaded with accusation, and every movement hinted at danger. Mira's heart pounded, but she felt strangely alive. The confrontation with Mr. Kapoor and the exposure of the initial secrets had shifted the balance. For the first time, the illusion of the family's complete control had cracks, and she knew she had to act before it healed. She leaned close to Samir, who was pale but steady. We can't wait, she whispered. We need proof, solid proof that will make everyone see the truth and can't be ignored. If we wait, they'll bury it. Samir nodded. Where do we start? Mira's eyes darted around the room. Every corner, every shadow, every quiet conversation could hide clues. Her gaze fell on Riya, who had been unusually tense since leading them to the private room. She approached quietly, voice low. Do you have anything else? Mira asked. Riya's eyes flickered. Yes. There's a hidden safe in the study behind the east wing. It contains contracts, letters, and recordings, things even the elders don't want anyone to see. But it's heavily guarded. A shiver ran down Mira's spine. Guarded. That word confirmed the stakes. This wasn't just about exposing a lie, it was about challenging a network of deception carefully built over years. And yet, something inside her refused to back down. We'll get it, Mira said firmly. We have to. As the wedding festivities continued around them, with polite smiles and nervous laughter masking the tension, Mira and Samir discreetly slipped away toward the east wing. Each step was measured, silent, as if they were intruders in their own story. The hallways were dimly lit, and the faint hum of music and chatter from the main hall seemed distant, almost unreal. They reached the study door, a solid wooden barrier with a complex lock. Rhea handed Mira a small key she had secretly taken from one of the attendants. "This works," she whispered. "But once you open it, there's no turning back. They'll know someone has accessed it immediately." Mira's hands were steady as she slid the key into the lock. Click. The door opened, revealing shelves lined with files, boxes, and a heavy safe at the back. The air smelled of old paper, dust, and something faintly metallic, like the scent of danger itself. She approached the safe, her pulse quickening. The combination was hidden in a small slip of paper inside Rhea's folder. 1, 2, 3, click. The safe opened, revealing stacks of documents, photographs, and a small recorder. Mira's eyes widened. Each item was a thread that, when pulled, could unravel the entire family network of lies, betrayals, and secret manipulations. "This is it," Mira whispered. "Everything we need." But before she could move further, a shadow fell across the doorway. They froze. It was Samir's father, his eyes blazing with fury, his posture rigid, every inch the image of authority. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded. His voice echoed in the study, sharp and accusing. Mira's heart raced, but she held her ground. "We're exposing the truth," she said calmly. "The lies, the manipulations, the games, you've run this family like a kingdom of fear." "Not anymore." His expression darkened. "You think you can just take what belongs to the family? You think you can destroy us?" "I think it's time everyone sees the truth," Mira replied firmly. "And nothing you say or do can stop that now." Samir stepped forward, his voice steady. "Father, it's time. No more secrets. No more lies. Mira is right." The tension was palpable, every second stretching into eternity. Mr. Kapoor's gaze flicked to the documents on the table. His jaw tightened, and for a brief moment, Mira saw hesitation, a rare crack in his armor. Then, suddenly, he lunged toward the recorder. "Give me that," he shouted. Mira reacted instantly, her reflexes sharp. She grabbed the recorder, holding it high. "No! This proves everything," she shouted, her voice carrying the weight of defiance. The struggle was brief but intense. Guests outside the study began to gather, drawn by the raised voices. The battle over truth and control had become physical, immediate, and unavoidable. Samir stepped between Mira and his father. "Enough," he yelled, voice firm. "This ends now. We either face the truth together, or we lose everything. Including each other." The room went silent. Even Mr. Kapoor paused, breathing heavily, his eyes blazing but his hands dropping slightly. Mira realized that courage alone was not enough. Strategy, timing, and precision were equally important. They needed the world to see, to bear witness. Mira glanced at Samir. "We need to act fast. Take the documents, the recorder, everything. And make sure it reaches the wedding hall. Everyone must see it." Samir nodded, and together they grabbed the files. As they moved back toward the main hall, Mira's mind raced. This was only the first strike, the initial exposure. The Kapoor family could retaliate, their influence was immense, and yet, if the truth came out, it would ignite a domino effect no one could stop. And then, as they reached the doorway, a sudden noise froze them, a soft, deliberate click, followed by the sound of locks engaging. The safe had been automatically sealed behind them. Mira's pulse thundered. Someone had anticipated their move. They were not just fighting for justice, they were fighting against a system of secrets designed to strike back at anyone daring enough to challenge it. Would they succeed in exposing the Kapoor family's hidden crimes? Could they stay one step ahead of the people who had spent years manipulating everyone around them? And more importantly, what would the fallout be when the truth hit the wedding hall like a storm? The wedding hall, once glittering with celebration, now felt like a powder keg. Guests whispered nervously, their eyes darting toward the east wing where Mira and Samir had disappeared. Something was happening, something impossible to ignore. The music, once cheerful and elegant, had been replaced by a tense silence, broken only by the occasional clink of a dropped glass or the hurried shuffle of a foot. Mira and Samir emerged from the corridor, clutching the folders and recorder tightly. Their eyes scanned the crowd. Whispers erupted into audible murmurs as their bold return caught everyone by surprise. Mira's pulse thundered, but she held her head high, her gown flowing behind her like a banner of defiance. She stepped forward, placing the recorder on a table in the center of the hall. The guests leaned in automatically, curiosity mixing with fear. Some recognized the gravity in Mira's expression, and others only sensed that a storm was about to erupt. She pressed the play button, and the soft hum of the recording filled the room, a series of conversations, confessions, and admissions that exposed years of manipulation and hidden agendas. Gasps echoed through the hall. Faces drained of color. Some guests whispered frantically, others recoiled in shock, and a few pressed hands to their mouths in disbelief. Mira's voice rang clear as she addressed the room. This is the truth. Every lie, every humiliation, every plan meant to control or hurt me, and anyone like me, is here for everyone to see. Mr. Kapoor's face went pale. His carefully constructed composure cracked, and for the first time, fear shone in his eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, but Mira raised a hand. Let the evidence speak, she said firmly. Because today, we stop hiding behind power, wealth, and manipulation. Today, the truth stands above all of that. Samir stood beside her, holding her hand, lending silent support. He turned to the guests and said, I can no longer accept the lies that have been fed to us. I will not be part of deceit. My family must face what they've done. The hall erupted. Some relatives shouted, accusing Mira of overstepping her bounds. Others murmured apologies, realizing too late that the veil of secrecy had been torn away. The elder women clutched at each other, whispering frantic explanations, while the younger ones exchanged knowing looks, as if some of these secrets had long been suspected but never confirmed. Mira walked slowly through the room, her eyes meeting those of the audience. Every stare was a mixture of curiosity, shock, and fear. She felt power, yes, but also the weight of responsibility. This wasn't just about revenge or humiliation, it was about exposing injustice, no matter how personal or uncomfortable. Suddenly, a voice rang out from the back of the hall. Enough! It was Ria, her voice trembling but commanding attention. You think this ends with embarrassment? You don't understand what this family is capable of. They've hidden more than letters and contracts. There are things far worse. The guests froze. Mr. Kapoor's jaw tightened. Mira turned toward Ria. What do you mean? She asked. Ria swallowed, her hands shaking. There are manipulations that have affected lives outside this family. Careers destroyed, businesses ruined, people forced into silence. And they've done it without consequence, until now. The room fell silent. The weight of Ria's words pressed down on everyone. Some guests exchanged worried glances, others gasped audibly. The storm that Mira had unleashed was bigger than anyone had imagined. Mira felt a chill. This was no longer just about humiliation at a wedding. This was a reckoning. The truth she had revealed was only the beginning. She could see it in the faces around her, the fear, the realization, the panic. And in the eyes of Mr. Kapoor, she saw something more dangerous, the resolve of a man unwilling to surrender his power quietly. Mira knew she had to act carefully. One wrong step could turn this exposure into a full-blown war within the family, and possibly beyond. She raised her voice again, steady and clear. We can choose to stop this cycle. We can choose honesty, justice, and dignity. The time for hiding is over. It's up to you all. Will you accept the truth, or continue living in lies? A tense silence followed. Some nodded hesitantly, understanding the gravity of the moment. Others looked angry, unable to process the sudden collapse of their world. And Mr. Kapoor's hand trembled as he adjusted his tie, a gesture of a man trying to maintain control but failing. Then, as if timed perfectly, the recorder clicked off. The room was silent, the echoes of the truth still resonating in every corner. Mira glanced at Samir. This is just the start. The reactions, the confessions, they're going to come next. And we have to be ready. At that exact moment, a loud crash echoed from the side hall, a vase toppled, a chair overturned. Gasps ran through the crowd. Someone had arrived unexpectedly, someone whose presence promised to escalate the conflict even further. Mira's heart skipped a beat. The storm she had begun was far from over. The family's secrets were being laid bare, but what about the consequences? Who would retaliate first? And would the Kapoor family attempt to silence the truth before it could spread completely? The answers were unknown, but one thing was certain: the wedding that was supposed to be a celebration of love had become a battlefield of truth, courage, and revenge. And Mira stood at the center of it all, ready to face whatever came next. The wedding hall, once shimmering with celebration, now felt like a battlefield. The air buzzed with tension, whispers ricocheting across the marble floors. Guests who had been polite and composed just moments ago now shifted uneasily in their seats, their faces pale or flushed with anxiety. The revelation of the Kapoor family's manipulations had sent shockwaves through every corner of the room, and no one knew what would happen next. Mira stood tall, clutching the recorder and folders tightly. Sameer's hand rested lightly on hers, a grounding presence amid the chaos. She had expected anger, denial, maybe even fainting relatives, but she hadn't expected retaliation this quickly. A sharp shout broke the tense silence. "How dare you!" It was Mr. Kapoor, his face twisted with fury. His voice carried authority, anger, and a sense of threat that made the guests flinch. "You've humiliated this family in front of everyone. You will regret this." Mira's heart raced, but she refused to falter. Her gaze met his directly, unwavering. "The humiliation was already here," she said softly, but every word cut like a knife. "You humiliated me, Sameer, and anyone who tried to love freely." "I merely exposed it." A murmur ran through the hall. Some guests gasped, while others whispered agreements under their breath. Mira felt the tension, but she also felt power. The truth was on her side, and that truth could no longer be denied. Before Mr. Kapoor could respond, Riya stepped forward. "It's not just about humiliation," she said, her voice trembling but strong. "This family has destroyed lives, manipulated careers, and silenced anyone who opposed them. And now, everyone knows." The words hung in the air. Some of the guests turned pale, realizing they had been unknowingly complicit or witnesses to subtle abuses. Others whispered, horrified, as they connected the dots of past events. Suddenly, a series of phones began to ring across the hall. Guests who had already received photos, audio clips, and documents sent by Riya to trusted contacts outside the wedding. Within moments, social media notifications exploded, messages circulated, and news of the revelations began spreading in real time. The Kapoor family's empire of secrecy was collapsing faster than anyone had imagined. Mira's eyes scanned the crowd. She noticed shocked relatives clutching their pearls, the frowning siblings of Sameer whispering urgently, and some distant family members hurriedly leaving the hall. And then, she saw him, the first act of retaliation. Sameer's older brother, Arun, stormed forward, his face red with fury. "You think you can destroy us in front of everyone?" he shouted, his voice echoing. "You will pay for this, Mira." Mira's pulse surged. She had expected anger, but not violence. She didn't flinch. "If telling the truth is destroying lies, then yes," she said firmly. "I will pay with nothing, because I have already paid enough with humiliation and fear." Arun advanced, but Sameer stepped in, his voice firm. "Stop. We are not letting this continue. No one gets hurt here." A tense silence followed. Arun hesitated, fury burning in his eyes, but he did not advance further. Mira realized that control was shifting, slowly, but it was shifting. The elders, sensing the power dynamics change, whispered urgently among themselves. Some nodded at Arun, signaling restraint. Others looked anxious, realizing the house of cards they had built was crumbling. Then, from the corner of the hall, Riya handed Mira a small envelope. "There's more," she said, her voice low. "Evidence of everything: conspiracies, manipulations, financial crimes. But you have to be careful. This is dangerous."
Mira took the envelope, her hand steady despite the rising adrenaline. She glanced at Samir.
"We expose everything," she said.
"Now is the only chance."
At that exact moment, the wedding photographer accidentally dropped his camera near the stage. The flash went off, and Mira noticed something alarming: a figure in the back of the hall slipping an envelope into Mr. Kapoor's pocket. She realized immediately that the family had anticipated some exposure and was trying to salvage what they could.
Mira's mind raced.
If they retrieved that envelope, the evidence could disappear, and her bold actions might be erased. Without hesitation, she moved swiftly, intercepting the man and pulling the envelope free. The room gasped at her speed and daring.
"Not so fast," she said, holding the envelope high. "Everything is out in the open now."
The tension was palpable. Every guest sensed that this was no longer just a wedding scandal, it was a full-blown revelation, and the Kapoor family's carefully maintained power was being dismantled piece by piece. Suddenly, Mr. Kapoor's voice boomed across the hall, "Enough!
You think exposing us like this will end well? This is not over.
You will regret crossing this family."
Mira's jaw tightened.
"The only regret you should feel is hiding lies for so long. Today, the truth wins."
As the crowd watched, the first cracks in the family's unity began to show. Some members whispered, questioning the elders' authority.
Others started moving toward Mira and Samir, some in support, some in fear. The storm had begun, and no one could predict how far it would spread. But then, a sudden, sharp noise echoed from the main entrance, a crash, like a door being forced open.
Guests jumped.
Everyone turned toward the sound, hearts racing. Mira felt a shiver run down her spine. Someone, or something, was coming. And she knew instantly that the next wave of the battle would not just be about words, accusations, or revelations.
It would be about power, influence, and survival. Would the Kapoor family retaliate openly and risk exposure, or would they strike in secret, pulling hidden strings no one yet saw? Could Mira and Samir protect the truth in themselves, or would the family's influence crush them before they had a chance to act?
And most importantly, who would emerge victorious in this war of secrets and courage? The tension was unbearable, and the storm had only just begun. The wedding hall, once radiant with celebration, now felt like the eye of a storm. Guests stood frozen in a mix of awe, fear, and disbelief. Whispers had grown into a low roar, punctuated by gasps as the full weight of Mira and Samir's revelations began sinking in. Every smile now carried tension, every polite nod seemed heavy with judgment, and every glance could ignite a confrontation.
Mira's eyes scanned the hall.
The recorder, still resting on the central table, had captured the evidence, the lies, the manipulations, the calculated humiliation. The envelope she had intercepted contained even more: financial schemes, letters proving deceit, and recordings that exposed not just intentions but actions that had harmed people outside the family circle. The truth was out.
The audience had become the jury.
Mr. Kapoor stood rigidly near the stage, his face pale but fierce, trying to mask the fear and fury swirling inside him. His authority, once absolute, had been shattered in front of everyone. Every whispered word, every exposed secret, had eroded the foundation of control he had built for decades.
"You think this is over?" he shouted, voice booming, trembling slightly. "You've humiliated this family. You will regret this."
Mira stepped forward, her chin held high, her voice calm but powerful.
"No.
The humiliation has always been yours, hidden behind lies, manipulation, and control. Today, the truth is public.
And that changes everything."
Some guests nodded slowly, murmuring in agreement, while others gasped audibly. The air was thick with tension, the weight of exposure pressing down on everyone in the room. Then Arun, Samir's older brother, stepped forward, anger flashing in his eyes. He had been silent until now, but the chaos had awakened something fierce inside him.
"You think you can just destroy us?" he yelled. "You've crossed a line."
"Not destroyed," Mira said, her voice steady.
"Revealed."
"The line was crossed the moment lies became your weapon. Now the choice is yours: continue hiding or face what you've done." The murmurs grew louder as the guests processed the confrontation. Some whispered to each other, realizing that even distant relatives and friends were implicated in the web of deception.
Others shifted nervously, sensing that their own positions in the social hierarchy might be threatened. Suddenly, Ria stepped forward, addressing the entire hall.
This family has manipulated everyone inside and outside these walls. Careers, reputations, even marriages have been affected.
And yet, no one dared speak up, until now.
Her words were a spark that ignited a chain reaction.
Guests began whispering louder, some confronting their own relatives, others asking questions about past events that now seemed suspicious.
The wedding that had started as a celebration of love had become a public reckoning. Samir moved closer to Mira, his voice low but firm.
We can't stop now.
We need to make sure the truth reaches everyone. They have to understand what has been hidden for years.
Mira nodded. We expose everything. No one gets to hide behind power anymore.
Just then, the doors to the hall burst open. Several media personnel, tipped off by anonymous messages likely from Ria, flooded the room, cameras flashing, microphones pointed toward the central table. The crowd gasped. The scandal was now public, the exposure no longer confined to whispered conversations within the wedding hall. Mr. Kapoor's face drained of color. His hands trembled as he realized the scale of what was happening. The carefully maintained facade of control was collapsing under the weight of evidence, courage, and public scrutiny. Mira held her ground, the recorder in hand.
Everyone will see. Everyone will know. And no one will be able to deny it.
The crowd erupted into a mixture of shock, awe, and murmured agreement.
Some guests stepped forward, offering quiet support to Mira and Samir. Others fled, unwilling to confront the storm now fully unleashed.
Mr. Kapoor turned, his face twisted with fury and fear.
This isn't over. You will pay. Mira looked him in the eyes, unwavering. No. The only thing you will pay for is your lies. And that payment is long overdue. At that exact moment, Samir's voice rang out, we're done hiding. The family has been exposed. And now, it's time to face the consequences.
The guests erupted again, some cheering, some gasping. The storm that had been building since Mira first tore open the letter had now reached its peak. Secrets had been revealed, lies exposed, and the Kapoor family's control dismantled in front of everyone. But even as the hall filled with chaos, a sense of clarity settled over Mira. She had acted boldly, faced fear, and refused to accept humiliation. She had stood for truth, justice, and dignity, and in doing so, she had changed the course of the day, the family, and her own life forever. Yet, as she looked around the room, she realized one truth remained: power and deception had not vanished. They still lingered, waiting for the next moment to strike. And the real question was whether the Kapoor family, humiliated and exposed, would rise to fight back or crumble under the weight of their own secrets.
Mira took a deep breath, holding Samir's hand.
The path ahead was uncertain, but she knew one thing: courage and truth had won today. The rest would unfold in time, as consequences, justice, and karma took their course.
And as the cameras captured every moment, as whispers became stories, and as the family faced their first reckoning, one question echoed through the hearts of everyone in the hall: what would happen next, and who would survive the storm they had unleashed? The wedding hall had descended into controlled chaos. Guests whispered feverishly, some gathering in tight circles to discuss the revelations, while others pulled out their phones, documenting every detail. The cameras and microphones now broadcasting the scandal live added another layer of intensity. What had started as a wedding was now a spectacle of truth, power, and consequences. Mira stood at the center, holding the recorder and folders, her posture calm but commanding. Samir remained close, his protective presence a steady anchor amidst the storm. They exchanged a glance, silent acknowledgement that the first strike had been successful, but the battle was far from over. Across the room, the Kapoor family was in turmoil. Mr. Kapoor's face was ashen, his hands gripping the edge of a table for support. He had spent decades orchestrating control, crafting narratives, and ensuring no one could challenge the family's power. Yet, in the span of a few hours, that carefully constructed empire had begun crumbling. Arun, his fury barely restrained, stormed past some guests. "This isn't over," he yelled, his voice echoing through the hall. "You think exposing us will destroy everything? You have no idea who you're dealing with." Mira's gaze met his.
"We know exactly who you are," she replied.
"And the world will know too.
You've lived in shadows for too long."
Rhea moved quickly to Mira's side. "We have more evidence," she whispered. "Emails, recordings, letters, everything that can prove the extent of their manipulations. If we distribute these to the right people, the family cannot recover from this publicly."
Mira nodded, her mind racing. They needed strategy, precision, and courage. They couldn't allow the Kapoor family to regain control. The next steps would define the outcome not just for the family, but for everyone affected by their manipulations.
Meanwhile, murmurs turned into confrontations.
Distant relatives, previously silent, stepped forward, emboldened by Mira's courage.
Some demanded explanations, others accused the elders of deceit, and a few even admitted their own complicity.
The carefully maintained hierarchy of the Kapoor family was dissolving before their eyes. Suddenly, Mr. Kapoor raised his voice, attempting to regain control.
"Enough! You think the world ends here? You have no idea what consequences await you if you continue."
But the threats fell flat. The live coverage, the evidence in Mira's hands, and the murmurs of the guests had stripped the family of their aura of invincibility. Courage had shifted the balance, and even Mr. Kapoor could not manipulate the unfolding reality.
Mira took a deep breath and addressed the crowd. "This is the truth.
The lies, the control, the manipulation, everything has been hidden for too long. Today, the people affected have a voice.
And today, justice begins."
Some guests nodded silently, somewhat quietly, and others whispered in shock. The truth, finally revealed, had set off a wave of emotion and reckoning that no one could ignore. Then, a sudden shout from the back of the hall drew everyone's attention. It was Samir's cousin, her face flushed with urgency. "There's more," she cried.
"The family's actions didn't just affect us, they affected businesses, friends, and even local communities.
Documents and communications have been leaked to authorities."
The room erupted anew.
The scope of the exposure was far greater than anyone had imagined. It was no longer a private family scandal, it was a public reckoning.
Mira felt a mix of relief and apprehension.
They had struck a decisive first blow, but the next wave would be just as challenging. The Kapoor family had power, influence, and resources. And while the truth had shattered their control in the room, retaliation outside the hall was inevitable.
She glanced at Samir.
"We've started something that can't be undone," she said softly.
"The family will fight back.
But we have to be ready for them, and for what comes next." Samir squeezed her hand.
"We'll face it together. Whatever they throw at us, we won't back down."
Outside the hall, the wind picked up, rustling banners and scattering petals. It was as if nature itself sensed the storm that had been unleashed. Inside, every glance, every whispered word, every piece of evidence contributed to the growing tension.
The Kapoor family's empire of secrets was in collapse, but the battle for justice was only beginning. Would the Kapoor family retaliate publicly or strike in secret to regain control? Could Mira and Samir maintain their courage and clarity under mounting pressure? And what unforeseen forces might emerge now that the family's influence had been challenged so openly?
The answers were uncertain, but one truth was clear: the aftermath of this day would reshape lives, redefine relationships, and leave no one untouched. The calm after the storm was short-lived. While the wedding hall had become a stage for revelation, the world beyond its doors was already reacting. Phones buzzed incessantly, cameras flashed, and messages spread like wildfire. The Kapoor family's secrets, once carefully guarded, had ignited a chain reaction they could no longer control. Mira and Samir stood at the center, feeling both empowered and aware of the danger. They had taken the first step, but the backlash was inevitable. Mira's eyes scanned the hall, noting every tense glance and every nervous whisper. Some guests were emboldened, moving closer with supportive nods, while others, clearly loyal to the Kapoor family, lingered uneasily at the edges. Suddenly, Arun's voice cut sharply through the murmurs. "You think this ends here?" he shouted, his anger palpable.
You've crossed the line, and now there will be consequences.
Mira's jaw tightened, her eyes meeting his. The only consequences you should fear are those of your own actions.
We've only begun to expose the truth. What you do now cannot undo what has been revealed.
Arun stepped forward aggressively, but Samir intercepted him.
Enough, he yelled. No one is getting hurt. But we will not back down.
Outside the hall, Mr. Kapoor had already begun mobilizing his allies. Family friends, business partners, and influential contacts were receiving urgent calls. The walls of secrecy were starting to shake beyond the wedding hall, and retaliation in multiple forms was inevitable.
Mira understood immediately.
The battle was no longer confined to this hall, it was spreading into the broader world, threatening both social and professional spheres.
Yet, she felt no fear. Only determination.
She had come too far to stop now. Ria appeared beside her, holding another set of documents. There's proof of financial misdeeds, hidden transfers, and manipulation of public projects, she whispered.
If this goes public, their influence outside this family will collapse too. Mira nodded. Then we use it strategically.
We don't just expose, we control the narrative. Inside the hall, tension escalated further. Mr. Kapoor stepped forward, attempting to assert authority, his face pale with suppressed fury.
You think revealing documents will destroy me?
You will regret this. But the guests were no longer passive observers.
Some began questioning the family openly. Others expressed support for Mira and Samir.
The balance of power had shifted, and the aura of invincibility that had always surrounded the Kapoor family was gone.
Mira's gaze fell on the recorder. She pressed play again, letting the incriminating conversations fill the hall.
Gasps and murmurs spread like wildfire. Even loyalists began to falter, realizing that the evidence was irrefutable.
Then, the first act of retaliation hit, not in words, but in action.
One of the guests, a distant relative who had been quietly observing, suddenly revealed a hidden camera feed from the private room.
It showed Mira and Samir accessing the safe.
The room erupted with gasps and shouts.
Traitors!
Mr. Kapoor shouted, furious.
They are manipulating the situation. But Mira remained composed. No, this is transparency, she said. For the first time, everything is visible. There is no manipulation, only truth. The atmosphere in the hall was electric, a mixture of fear, awe, and anticipation. Everyone knew that the next moves would determine the ultimate outcome, whether the Kapoor family would regain control or continue unraveling under the weight of their own secrets.
Outside, vehicles arrived, trusted family allies and business associates. Murmurs spread that the Kapoor family was planning a private retaliation. The stage was set for confrontations that could no longer be contained within the wedding hall.
Mira glanced at Samir. They will strike soon. But we're ready. We have proof, strategy, and the truth on our side. They cannot undo that. Samir nodded, squeezing her hand. Whatever comes, we face it together. No backing down.
And in that moment, Mira realized the full scope of the storm she had unleashed. The wedding had become a battlefield of secrets, courage, and power. Every action from here would have consequences far beyond what anyone could imagine.
Would the Kapoor family's retaliation succeed? Could Mira and Samir stay one step ahead of a family used to controlling everyone and everything around them? And how far would the fallout spread, both inside the wedding and outside in the broader world?
The storm was far from over, and the most dangerous moments were still ahead. The wedding hall, once a place of celebration, now pulsed with tension. Every whisper, every shuffling footstep, seemed amplified in the charged atmosphere. Guests huddled in clusters, eyes darting between Mira, Samir, and the flustered Kapoor family. The storm they had unleashed had begun, but the first counterstrike was about to land. Outside, Mr. Kapoor's loyal allies had mobilized quickly. They were influential figures, friends, business associates, and social contacts who had long benefited from the family's control. Within minutes, phones began ringing urgently, messages buzzed on social media, and unseen forces began moving to reclaim dominance. Mira, sensing the shift, tightened her grip on the folders.
Samir, she whispered, they're not just angry, they're planning something. He nodded, eyes scanning the room. We have to stay calm.
They can't undo what's already public, but they can try to intimidate us.
And then it happened. The first blow. A loud crash from the side entrance startled everyone.
Guests jumped to their feet as the doors swung open, revealing a group of well-dressed men, friends and enforcers of the Kapoor family, marching confidently into the hall. Their eyes were hard, expressions unreadable but clearly carrying a threat. "Everyone stay where you are," one of the men barked.
"No one moves until we've addressed this."
The guests froze, some in shock, others in fear. The tension was immediate and suffocating. Mira stepped forward, her posture fearless, her voice steady.
"You're too late. The truth is already out. No threats will change that."
The men hesitated for a split second, but Mr. Kapoor, attempting to regain control, raised his hand. "Take them aside," he commanded sharply. "Ensure they understand their place.
They have gone too far."
Arun, who had been simmering with anger all day, moved to block the men.
"Back off," he shouted. "No one touches them."
Mira looked at Samir, seeing both worry and pride in his eyes. They were surrounded, yet their resolve had not wavered. Courage, she realized, was contagious and it was now flowing through the guests as well. The enforcers tried to advance, but guests began stepping forward, forming an unlikely barrier. Some distant relatives, previously silent, whispered warnings to the men. Others used their presence to subtly intimidate, showing that the audience had shifted its allegiance, even if quietly. Mira raised her voice, addressing everyone in the room.
"This is the moment. The family may try to strike back, but courage and truth cannot be silenced.
Stand with us or step aside, but the truth will not be buried again." A murmur of agreement spread through the crowd. The first act of retaliation, meant to intimidate and silence, had been deflected by presence, unity, and sheer audacity. But the storm was far from over. Mira sensed it in the flicker of Mr. Kapoor's eyes, in the tension of Arun's jaw, and in the sharp glances of the enforcers.
This was only the beginning.
The Kapoor family had more power, more influence, and more secrets than anyone could anticipate, and they would strike again, more decisively. Riya leaned close to Mira. "There's another package," she whispered.
"Evidence we haven't revealed yet. If we use it, it could break them completely, but it will escalate the conflict." Mira swallowed hard.
The choice was clear: wait and let the family recover, or strike decisively and risk everything. Her pulse quickened as she realized that this was more than a wedding confrontation, it was a war of courage versus control, truth versus deception. Samir placed his hand on hers. "Whatever we do next, we do it together," he said firmly. She nodded, determination hardening within her. "Then we end this today, or they'll never stop trying to control everyone around them." The enforcers glared, guests watched tensely, and the Kapoor family's facade of power began to crumble visibly. The first blow had been deflected, but retaliation would escalate, and the stakes were now higher than ever.
Would Mira and Samir stand strong against the Kapoor family's next attack? Could they maintain courage under mounting pressure? And what hidden moves would the family attempt next in their desperate bid to regain control and silence the truth?
The answers hung in the air, charged with tension, as the storm of consequences and courage intensified. The tension in the wedding hall had reached a breaking point. The first blow of the Kapoor family's retaliation had failed to intimidate Mira and Samir, but it had made one thing abundantly clear: the family would stop at nothing to regain control. Their influence, their cunning, and their connections made them formidable adversaries, and the stakes had never been higher. Mira looked around the hall, her mind racing. Guests were divided, some clearly on her side, emboldened by the courage she had shown, while others, loyal to the family, watched silently, their expressions wary. She knew she had to act decisively. Waiting would only give the Kapoors time to plan a more dangerous move. Riya approached, holding a thick folder of additional evidence. "This is everything we've collected," she whispered. "Financial misdeeds, letters, recordings, contracts. If we reveal this now, it will expose the full scope of their manipulation.
But it will escalate the conflict. they'll fight back hard. Mira took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on Samir. Then we escalate. We reveal everything. No half-truths, no delays. If they want war, we'll fight with truth. Samir nodded. Together. With that, Mira moved to the center of the hall, holding the folder high. The room fell silent, all eyes drawn to her. Everyone here has seen some of the truth already, she began, her voice clear and commanding. But the full story has been hidden until now. She opened the folder, spreading the documents on the central table. Guests leaned in, eyes widening as the evidence became visible: financial manipulations, letters of deceit, secret contracts designed to humiliate and control, recordings of conversations exposing hidden schemes. The weight of the family's actions pressed down on the room like a tangible force. Gasps filled the hall. Murmurs turned into urgent conversations. Some guests whispered agreements, realizing the depth of the deception. Others stepped back, shocked by the scale of the Kapoor family's manipulations. Even loyalists could no longer maintain their composure. Mr. Kapoor's face turned red with fury. You dare expose this? You've crossed every boundary. Mira remained composed, her gaze unwavering. The boundaries were crossed long ago, she said firmly. We are only restoring balance. The truth has a power you cannot control. Arun clenched his fists, seething. This is an attack on our family. You'll regret this. Mira's eyes met his, unwavering. The only regret you should feel is hiding your lies for so long. Today, the world sees what you've done. And no threats, no anger, and no manipulation can change that. Suddenly, a group of guests who had been quietly observing stepped forward. Some were extended relatives, others influential community members, and a few local journalists. We support the exposure, one of them said, voice steady. We've seen enough manipulation, enough secrecy. This stops now. The momentum shifted further. The first wave of public support bolstered Mira's confidence. The guests who had once hesitated now formed a united front, their presence a protective barrier against any immediate retaliation. But the cappers were not finished. Mr. Kapoor raised his hand, summoning an air of authority. You may think you've won, but the consequences will reach beyond this hall. Your courage will bring chaos, and you will be held accountable. Mira took a deep breath, sensing the gravity of the moment. Accountability begins with truth, she said. And today, we ensure no one can hide behind lies again. Then, Ria handed Mira another set of recordings, this time of private conversations between the family's business associates, revealing collusion and deceit that extended far beyond the wedding hall. Mira played the recordings. The room went silent, the sound of hidden schemes now public reverberating in every corner. Some guests wept quietly, realizing how deeply the family's manipulations had reached. Others whispered urgent conversations, connecting the dots with past events. The Kapoor family's influence was crumbling, exposed layer by layer, with no chance to recover unnoticed. Mira glanced at Samir, her resolve solid. We've started a chain reaction, she said. There's no turning back now. Outside the hall, messages were spreading like wildfire. Photos, recordings, and documents were being shared across social media, reaching not only the wedding's guests but the wider community. The fallout was unstoppable. The Kapoor family had underestimated Mira's courage, the power of truth, and the willingness of people to stand with honesty. And now, with the first counterattack successfully executed, the family was beginning to fracture under the pressure of their own secrets. But Mira knew the battle was far from over. The family would retaliate again, more strategically, more dangerously. And she had to be ready not just to defend the truth, but to protect herself, Samir, and everyone who stood with her. Would the cappers crumble completely, or would they strike back with even greater force? Could Mira and Samir maintain their courage as the stakes rose higher? And what unexpected consequences would unfold as the family's secrets were fully exposed? The storm had escalated, and the next moves would define who would emerge victorious in this war of truth, courage, and power.
The atmosphere in the wedding hall had become electric with tension.
Guests shifted uneasily, some whispering in fear, others with a sense of cautious admiration for Mira's audacity.
The Kapoor family, once untouchable, now appeared vulnerable, yet danger still lurked in every corner. Mira and Samir stood at the center, a united front. But outside the hall, the Kapoor family had begun planning their next move. It would not be another public confrontation. This time, the attack was personal. They aimed to strike at what Mira valued most, not through documents or evidence, but through fear, manipulation, and threats. Suddenly, Mira's phone buzzed. A message appeared: "We know where she lives. She cannot hide forever." Her heart skipped a beat. Her pulse quickened. Samir immediately grabbed her hand, squeezing it firmly. "They've crossed a line," he said, voice low but intense.
"This isn't just about the wedding anymore." Mira's jaw tightened.
"Then we respond the same way we always have, with courage and truth.
We cannot let fear control us."
Meanwhile, inside the hall, tensions were mounting.
Guests whispered nervously as the Kapoors tried to maintain composure, though their panic was visible.
Mr. Kapoor's face was pale, his hands trembling slightly as he scanned the room. Arun and other loyalists exchanged worried glances. They had realized that Mira and Samir were not only unafraid, but strategically bold. Just then, a relative, previously silent and distant, stepped forward. "You think you've won?" he sneered. "You have no idea what power we still hold.
You cannot control everything."
Mira turned slowly, her eyes locking onto him. "Power built on lies is fragile.
And today, it is crumbling."
The man laughed harshly, but before he could respond further, a sudden commotion erupted at the hall's entrance. A group of people, media, family friends, and even some authorities tipped off by Mira and Ria entered, cameras flashing, recording everything. The unexpected presence turned the tide immediately. Guests gasped, the Kapoors stiffened.
Mira realized this was the turning point.
By making the confrontation public and involving witnesses beyond the family circle, she had removed the advantage of secrecy the Kapoors relied upon.
But the family's personal strike wasn't finished.
A sudden scream came from the back of the hall. Guests turned to see one of the Kapoors attempting to drag a distant relative away, someone who had been vocal in support of Mira.
Arun moved instantly, intercepting the attacker and pulling the person to safety.
"You'll pay for this," Arun shouted, but his voice carried desperation rather than authority.
Mira's mind raced. She knew they had to act quickly before the Kapoors' personal attacks escalated further.
"Everyone stay calm," she said firmly.
"We have evidence. We have witnesses. We do not need to retaliate with violence, we act strategically." Ria handed her another folder. "There are recordings of private messages and threats.
If we release these now, even their personal attacks will be exposed publicly. They can't touch anyone without consequences."
Mira nodded.
Her pulse raced with determination. She moved to the center, opened the folder, and projected the messages on a large screen the hall had set up for wedding slides.
The room went silent.
Threats, manipulations, and attempts to intimidate Mira and her supporters were visible to all.
Gasps echoed. Faces paled.
Even the loyalists hesitated, realizing that any further personal attacks would be witnessed, documented, and publicly scrutinized. The Kapoors' personal strike had backfired spectacularly, strengthening Mira's position.
Mira looked at Samir, their hands clasped tightly.
"They want to scare us," she said.
"But courage is stronger than fear. And truth is stronger than intimidation."
The hall seemed to breathe collectively, guests sensing the shift. What had started as a wedding confrontation had turned into a strategic victory for Mira and Samir. Yet, she knew this was not the end. The Kapoors were desperate now, and desperate people could be unpredictable and dangerous.
Would the family escalate further, risking exposure beyond repair? Could Mira and Samir maintain their courage against increasingly personal attacks? And what unexpected allies or betrayals might surface as the battle intensified?
The storm of courage, truth, and retaliation had grown more intense, and the next moments promised to test every limit of resolve, loyalty, and strategy. The wedding hall had become a battlefield of power, truth, and courage. The Cappers, once untouchable, now looked cornered, their authority slipping away with every revelation and public display of evidence. Yet, desperation fuels unpredictable moves, and the next chapter of the confrontation was about to unfold. Mira stood in the center, her posture firm, her eyes scanning the room.
Every guest now knew that she held the advantage.
The Cappers' attempts at intimidation had failed, and the exposure of threats and manipulations had turned potential supporters against the family. But Mira sensed that victory would not come from evidence alone, it required strategic alliances. Rhea leaned close, whispering urgently.
Some of the guests have influence beyond this hall. If we get them on our side, the Cappers cannot recover publicly or privately. Mira nodded.
She moved toward a cluster of relatives and distant friends who had been silent observers until now. "We need your support," she said clearly.
The truth has been revealed.
We need to stand together, not just for today, but for everyone affected by deception. Several guests stepped forward, their faces tense but resolute.
Murmurs of agreement spread quickly. One by one, they pledged to support Mira and Samir, signaling that the tide had shifted irreversibly.
But just as hope began to swell, a shocking betrayal emerged. Arun's closest ally, who had been silently observing and nodding, suddenly stepped back and whispered to Mr. Kapoor.
A flash of realization hit Mira. This was no ordinary betrayal.
It was a calculated attempt to regain leverage by secretly coordinating with the family while pretending to side with Mira. Arun noticed the movement and froze. "You traitor," he shouted. The room's energy shifted, tension spiking as whispers of betrayal spread. The once unified front of Mira's allies was now questioned, the fear of hidden motives threatening to undermine the momentum.
Mira's gaze hardened. "Betrayal cannot stop truth," she said calmly but firmly.
"We expose lies, deceit, and manipulation, and nothing else matters. Trust those who stand openly, and move forward without fear." Her words carried weight.
The crowd rallied, reaffirming support for Mira and Samir.
Even those hesitant at first now felt empowered to stand openly, recognizing the courage required to confront the Kapoor family's manipulation. Suddenly, Mr. Kapoor raised his hand, signaling a new form of attack. This time, it wasn't threats or intimidation, it was a public smear attempt. A trusted family associate, known for influence in the community, began spreading rumors about Mira's character and intentions.
Some guests turned, confused and alarmed, as whispers of doubt began circulating.
Mira's heart pounded, but she remained composed. "Rumors are the weapon of the desperate," she said loudly, her voice carrying across the hall.
"But evidence and truth are stronger.
Look at the facts, the recordings, the documents.
Nothing can hide the truth now." A tense silence followed. Guests stared, many nodding in agreement. Others, skeptical at first, began realizing that the Cappers' influence had limits when faced with courage and transparency.
Rhea handed Mira a folder containing additional documents, proof of the associates' involvement in past manipulations and collusions.
Mira raised the folder, showing the evidence.
"Even attempts to discredit us are part of the web of lies.
The truth is clear." Gasps and whispers filled the room.
Faces that had been uncertain now aligned with Mira, inspired by her resolve and the clarity of the evidence.
The Cappers' attempts at personal attacks and influence were unraveling, brick by brick.
Mira glanced at Samir, determination and pride in her eyes. "Every betrayal, every manipulation, every threat, they only strengthen our position if we stay courageous.
Truth cannot be undone."
Outside, messages were spreading faster than anyone could control. Videos, recordings, and documents were being shared on social media and with authorities, ensuring the Cappers' influence outside the hall could no longer sway outcomes.
But Mira knew the danger wasn't over. The family had been cornered, and cornered adversaries were unpredictable.
The next wave could be more ruthless, more cunning, and it would test their courage, alliances, and strategy like never before.
Would the Cappers strike back through hidden schemes? Could Mira and Samir maintain the strength of their growing alliances? And how far would betrayal and manipulation extend as the battle for justice reached its peak?
The storm of courage, truth, and power raged on, and the next moves would shape the fate of everyone involved. The wedding hall, once brimming with celebration, had become a battleground of truth, courage, and power. Mira and Samir stood at the center, their allies now firmly behind them, but the Cappers were far from defeated. Cornered and desperate, they began plotting a more dangerous, secretive move, one designed to undermine Mira and Samir without drawing immediate public attention.
Mira sensed the tension immediately.
Even with the growing support of their allies, the atmosphere in the hall felt charged, as if danger lurked in unseen corners. Arun's eyes darted suspiciously across the crowd, Mr. Kapoor's jaw clenched, and the previously loyal associates whispered hurriedly among themselves. The family had learned quickly that open confrontation had failed, they would now operate in the shadows. A sudden commotion erupted near the entrance. Guests turned in alarm to see two men, unknown to most, moving toward the hall with urgent purpose. Their demeanor was controlled, professional, but there was an unmistakable air of threat.
Mira's pulse quickened.
"Samir," she whispered, gripping his hand, "this is it. They've moved beyond threats and public exposure, they're trying to take control secretly."
Samir nodded, scanning the room. "We need to stay calm and strategic. Fear will not help us now."
The men approached a group of Mira's allies, attempting to intimidate and isolate them. But before they could act, Arun and a few of the loyal supporters who had not betrayed the family intercepted them. A tense standoff followed, the men's intentions clear, they wanted to remove witnesses and regain leverage.
Mira realized the first priority: protect their allies.
"Everyone stay together," she shouted, projecting authority and urgency.
"Do not let them isolate anyone." Ria quickly activated her plan.
"We've alerted the media outside and authorities nearby," she said.
"They cannot act without being witnessed. Every move they make is now public."
The presence of cameras and witnesses created a sudden pause. The men froze, realizing that their secretive strike had been compromised before it could fully unfold. Arun stepped forward, his stance protective and defiant.
"Back off. This is public now. Any action against them will be your undoing."
Mira took the opportunity to step closer, holding the evidence folder high. "You can attempt secret attacks, but truth is stronger than deceit.
The world is watching now. Your moves are no longer hidden."
Despite the pause, tension remained high. The Cappers were desperate, they had lost control publicly, and their personal strike had been thwarted. Cornered, they could resort to extreme measures, making every moment unpredictable and dangerous. Then, the first shock came. A loyalist, previously aligned with the Cappers, switched sides openly.
"Enough of lies and manipulation," he declared, stepping toward Mira. "We cannot support this family's secrets anymore.
The truth must prevail." The declaration sent a ripple through the hall. More guests, emboldened by courage and the support of witnesses, began openly questioning the Cappers' authority. Fear, which had once reinforced the family's power, began to dissolve. Mira looked at Samir, determination hardening in her eyes. Every attack they plan, every move they make in secrecy, will only expose them further.
"We stay courageous. We stay united."
Outside the hall, the media continued coverage, social media buzzed, and authorities were already receiving evidence.
Any attempt by the Cappers to regain control would now face scrutiny beyond their influence. Yet, Mira knew the danger wasn't over. Cornered adversaries often act unpredictably.
The Cappers' next move could be more cunning, more ruthless, and possibly dangerous not just socially, but personally.
Would the Cappers escalate further, risking exposure and legal consequences? Could Mira and Samir maintain unity and courage under mounting pressure? And what shocking, unforeseen tactics might the family employ next as desperation grows? The storm of courage, truth, and strategic power was intensifying, and the next confrontation would test every ounce of Mira's resolve. The wedding hall had transformed completely. What began as a joyful celebration had become a tense arena of strategy, courage, and mounting danger. Mira and Samir's allies now stood firmly behind them, yet the Kapoor family, cornered and desperate, had prepared a high-stakes move designed to shake everyone's confidence. Mira sensed the shift immediately.
The air seemed heavier, charged with the anticipation of an unseen threat. Arun and Mr. Kapoor exchanged furtive glances, whispering urgently to their remaining loyalists. Their previous attempts at intimidation had failed publicly, and now they were planning a direct confrontation, one that was cunning, personal, and calculated to destabilize Mira and Samir's position. Suddenly, a hush fell over the hall. The Capper's allies stepped forward, a small group, yet their presence carried authority. They had the capability to manipulate, deceive, and sow confusion in ways that could dismantle Mira's growing support. Mira's pulse quickened, but she refused to show fear. "Samir," she whispered, gripping his hand, "this is their most dangerous move yet. We need courage, clarity, and strategy." Samir's eyes were sharp, scanning the room. "We can handle this. Together." The confrontation began subtly. A loyalist whispered false rumors to some of Mira's allies, attempting to create distrust. A few guests hesitated, unsure what to believe, but Mira acted immediately, projecting authority and truth. "Do not fall for lies," she said firmly, her voice carrying across the hall. "Every word that questions courage or integrity is part of their strategy to divide us. Look at the evidence, look at the truth. Stand together." Her words had a powerful effect. Guests who had wavered now reaffirmed their support, inspired by her clarity and resolve. The Capper's attempt to manipulate through whispers and fear began to crumble. But then came the personal strike, a more cunning and dangerous move. Arun, realizing public influence had failed, confronted Mira directly. "You've humiliated my family publicly," he said, voice low but menacing. "Now you will face the consequences. You think you are untouchable, but desperation makes people unpredictable." Mira met his gaze without flinching. "Desperation does not give you power over truth," she said steadily. "Your lies have already been exposed. Your manipulation is public. Courage and honesty cannot be silenced." Arun's eyes flashed, but before he could act further, a loud commotion erupted near the hall's entrance. Authorities, tipped off by Ria and some loyal allies, entered quickly, observing the situation carefully. Their presence created an immediate check on the Capper's potential actions. Mira realized the moment had shifted. What had been a high-stakes personal confrontation now became a stage for transparency and accountability. By combining courage, strategy, and public visibility, they had forced the family's hand. Any drastic move would now be witnessed, recorded, and scrutinized. Yet, danger still lingered. The Cappers were cornered, and cornered adversaries often act unpredictably. A sudden scream from the back of the hall made everyone turn. One of the Cappers had tried to manipulate a guest directly, attempting to cause chaos, but Arun's own loyalists intervened, restraining the situation. Mira's mind raced. "This is it," she whispered to Samir. "Every move they make now will either expose them further or backfire. We need to stay united and calm. Courage is our strongest weapon." Outside, cameras and media coverage captured every moment. Social media buzzed, authorities were involved, and the Capper's influence was being dismantled in real time. The high-stakes confrontation, meant to intimidate, had instead revealed the family's desperation and weakened their position further. Would the Cappers escalate even further, risking irreversible public exposure? Could Mira and Samir maintain their courage and unity under increasing pressure? And what unforeseen moves might the family attempt next, driven by desperation and fear of losing control entirely? The storm of courage, truth, and strategic confrontation had reached a critical peak, and the next moments would test every limit of loyalty, bravery, and cunning. The tension in the wedding hall had reached an unbearable height. Every whisper, every glance, seemed loaded with suspicion and anticipation. Mira and Samir's allies had held strong through threats, intimidation, and manipulations, but the Cappers, cornered and desperate, were preparing an explosive revelation, one that could shake everything to its foundation. Mira felt it immediately. Her pulse raced as she scanned the room. The Cappers exchanged hurried whispers, their faces pale with urgency. Arun's jaw was set in determination, while Mr. Kapoor's eyes darted nervously, betraying the anxiety they had tried to hide. They knew their public influence had failed, and the family's secrets were now exposed. Their next move would be calculated, bold, and dangerous. Suddenly, Arun stepped forward, his voice loud and sharp. "You've humiliated us in front of everyone," he shouted, his anger spilling over. "But you haven't seen the full truth. There are things you don't know, things that will change everything you think you understand about this family." Guests froze, a mix of fear and curiosity rippling through the hall. Murmurs spread like wildfire. What could Arun possibly reveal that would turn the tide? Mira's eyes narrowed. "We've seen the truth, Arun. The lies, the manipulations, the deception, they've all been exposed. You cannot frighten us with empty words." Arun's expression darkened. "Empty words? No. I have proof of alliances, hidden deals, and manipulations outside this hall, things that could ruin reputations, destroy careers, and undo what you've accomplished today." A hush fell. Even some of Mira's allies tensed, unsure what he meant. The potential threat of unseen consequences loomed over the room. Ria whispered urgently to Mira, "We have to act fast. He's trying to intimidate through uncertainty. If we hesitate, doubt may creep in." Mira took a deep breath, her eyes blazing with determination. "No one can intimidate us with threats alone. Let's face it head on." She stepped forward boldly. "Arun, if you have proof, show it. But know this, the world now sees the pattern of deceit. Anything you reveal will be weighed against the evidence already in the open. Courage and truth have shifted the balance." Arun's hand trembled slightly as he reached for a folder, revealing documents and photographs. The room tensed, waiting. For a moment, it seemed as though the cappers might regain the upper hand. But as Mira moved closer, she noticed something unusual. One of the documents had been altered. A photo was cropped misleadingly, and the letterhead had inconsistencies. Her instincts screamed that this revelation was carefully crafted to confuse and intimidate, not to expose the truth. With a calm but commanding voice, she addressed the room. "Everyone, watch closely. This is a manipulation attempt. The cappers are trying to create doubt, but we have the real evidence." Ria quickly brought forward the corresponding authentic documents. Mira laid them side by side with Arun's explosive revelation, clearly showing the discrepancies. Gasps echoed through the hall as the deception became obvious. Arun's face tightened, realizing that his strategy to intimidate and sway the crowd had failed spectacularly. Samir stepped beside Mira, his voice firm. "Desperation drives lies, Arun. Courage reveals truth. And today, we see both clearly." The crowd's energy shifted completely. Guests who had been hesitant now nodded in agreement, their confidence in Mira and Samir unwavering. Even some previously loyal cappers began to murmur, realizing the futility of deception in the face of courage and transparency. Mira glanced at Samir, determination shining in her eyes. "Every threat, every manipulation, every attempt to frighten us only strengthens our position. The more they try, the more exposed they become." Outside, the media and authorities were already aware of the unfolding drama. The cappers' attempts to intimidate and confuse were being documented, shared, and analyzed in real time. Their desperation had made them vulnerable, and their explosive revelation had backfired, strengthening Mira's control over the narrative. Would the cappers attempt an even riskier strategy now that their manipulation had failed? Could Mira and Samir maintain their courage in the face of escalating desperation? And what unexpected consequences might arise from the family's increasingly reckless moves? The storm of courage, truth, and exposure was intensifying, and the next chapter promised to challenge every boundary of strategy, loyalty, and resilience. The tension in the wedding hall had reached a breaking point. The cappers, once proud and commanding, now looked rattled, their desperation growing with every passing moment. Mira and Samir's courage, combined with the undeniable evidence they had exposed, had shifted the balance completely. What had begun as a personal confrontation had now escalated into a public reckoning. Outside the hall, word had spread rapidly. Social media buzzed with live updates, recordings of the exposed manipulations circulated, and news crews began arriving to cover the unprecedented drama. The Kapoor family's influence, carefully cultivated over decades, was crumbling before the eyes of not just the wedding guests, but the wider community. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Guests whispered, some shocked, some awed by the unfolding drama. Allies of Mira and Samir now felt emboldened to speak openly, confronting cappers who had relied on intimidation and secrecy for so long. Suddenly, Mr. Kapoor, visibly shaking, attempted to regain control.
Enough! This is my family. You cannot destroy us with lies. Mira stepped forward, her voice steady and unwavering. It's not lies, Mr. Kapoor. It's truth.
The manipulations, the threats, the deceit, they are all documented. The world is watching now, and you cannot hide behind your status or power. Arun tried to interject, but the guests had lost their fear. One by one, they began calling out specific instances of the family's wrongdoing, corroborating the evidence that Mira and Riya had revealed. The Kappers' allies faltered, realizing that public scrutiny had stripped away the family's protective veil. Then, the tipping point came. A key family associate, who had long remained neutral, stepped forward in full view of everyone. "I can no longer support the deception," he declared. "I stand with the truth, and with those who have the courage to reveal it."
Gasps filled the hall. The Kappers' control was unraveling rapidly. Faces that had once displayed loyalty now revealed hesitation and doubt.
Arun's hands clenched in frustration, while Mr. Kapoor's eyes darted nervously, realizing the collapse was unavoidable.
Mira's gaze swept the room.
She saw fear, relief, and awe mingling in the guests' expressions. Courage had ignited a ripple of accountability, one that the Kappers could not contain.
Then came the final shock, a public disclosure that left everyone stunned.
Riya held up a set of documents that exposed not only personal manipulations but also illegal dealings extending beyond the family's private sphere. Contracts, letters, and photographs detailed collusion, corruption, and abuse of influence that could have legal repercussions.
The guests murmured, some in disbelief, others in satisfaction at the long-awaited revelation.
The Kappers' public facade of power had collapsed entirely. Mr. Kapoor's voice faltered as he tried to respond, but no one listened. The hall was no longer under his control. Mira turned to Samir, a mix of triumph and determination in her eyes.
"This is just the beginning. Truth has taken root. The rest will follow, but today, the family's power has been shattered publicly."
Outside, reporters were capturing every moment, social media streams continued to explode, and authorities were beginning inquiries based on the newly exposed evidence.
The Kappers had underestimated the power of courage, transparency, and collective witness. Would the Kapoor family attempt a last-ditch effort to regain control? Could Mira and Samir withstand the coming scrutiny from legal authorities, media, and the wider community? And what unforeseen consequences would unfold as the family's secrets were fully exposed in the public eye?
The storm of truth, courage, and public accountability had reached its peak, and the final chapters promised to test every limit of resolve, morality, and power. The air in the wedding hall was thick with tension, but it carried a different weight now. It was no longer just fear or suspense, it was the weight of truth, exposure, and the impending consequences that the Kapoor family could no longer control. Mira and Samir had shifted the balance decisively, and now, every move the Kappers made was under scrutiny, both from the guests and the wider public. Mr. Kapoor's face was pale, his jaw tight, as he realized the scope of what had been unleashed. Arun, usually brash and commanding, now appeared cornered and wary. Their previous influence had crumbled, their allies had dwindled, the public exposure had reached every corner of their social and business networks.
But desperation can provoke dangerous, reckless actions.
The Kappers, knowing their power and reputation were collapsing, decided to strike one last time. A secret plan was set in motion, an attempt to discredit Mira and Samir through a manipulated scandal, intended to appear credible to anyone who had not witnessed the truth firsthand.
Mira sensed the danger immediately.
"Samir," she whispered, her voice firm, "this is their final play.
We cannot back down now. We have to act decisively before they escalate further."
Samir's eyes met hers.
"We're ready. We've faced everything so far. This is no different, except it's the climax."
The plan unfolded rapidly. The Kappers' loyalist attempted to leak falsified evidence, claiming Mira had manipulated the situation for personal gain. The guests' murmurs began again, uncertainty creeping into the room. A tense hush settled as everyone awaited Mira's response. Mira remained calm, her gaze sweeping across the hall.
"Everyone, listen carefully," she said. "This is exactly what we expected, a last-ditch attempt to create doubt. But courage and truth are stronger than deception. We have the evidence, the recordings, and the witnesses to prove everything." Rhea immediately brought forward corroborating proof, aligning every claim, every action, and every document with indisputable facts. The hall filled with murmurs of disbelief. How could the Cappers attempt such a blatant deception now that their lies had been revealed? Then, a dramatic confrontation occurred. Arun, frustrated and desperate, attempted to directly challenge Mira in front of the guests. "You think you've won? But people will believe the lies we present." Mira stepped forward, her voice commanding and unwavering. "Falsehoods cannot stand against transparency. Courage and truth have already shifted the tide. Look at the facts, and see the deception for what it is." One by one, the Cappers' remaining allies began to falter. Some openly withdrew support, recognizing that further attempts at manipulation would only deepen their own exposure. The hall, once a place of intimidation, had become a courtroom of morality, truth, and accountability. Outside, the social media coverage and media attention ensured that any attempts at discrediting Mira and Samir would be instantly scrutinized. The Cappers' final strike had backfired completely, making their position irreversible. Mira glanced at Samir, a mixture of exhaustion and triumph in her eyes. "This is it. Their power is broken, and the consequences are irreversible. Today, the truth has won." Would the Kapoor family find any way to regain even a shred of control? Could Mira and Samir maintain their integrity as the world watched their victory unfold? And what lasting impact would this storm of truth, courage, and accountability leave on everyone involved? The storm had reached its climax, and the stage was set for the final resolution, a moment that would determine justice, morality, and the ultimate triumph of truth over deceit. The wedding hall, once filled with laughter and celebration, now stood as a monument to truth, courage, and justice. The storm of tension that had gripped the room for hours had reached its climax, and the Cappers, stripped of influence and control, faced the full weight of their actions. Mira and Samir stood at the center, calm yet resolute. Around them, guests, allies, and even some previously neutral observers had witnessed the full unraveling of the Kapoor family's deceit. Every manipulation, every threat, every hidden scheme had been exposed, and the consequences were clear and undeniable. Mr. Kapoor's face was a mask of defeat. Arun, once full of arrogance and dominance, now looked small and powerless in the glare of public scrutiny. Their allies had abandoned them, some openly siding with Mira and Samir, while others remained silent, knowing any loyalty to the family now carried risk and shame. Mira stepped forward, her voice ringing with authority and conviction. "Today is proof that courage and truth cannot be silenced by lies or intimidation. Every attempt to manipulate, threaten, or deceive has been undone by transparency and bravery. The consequences are real, but they are fair. Justice is not about revenge, it's about truth being seen and acknowledged." The Cappers tried to speak, to protest, but their words fell flat. Guests shook their heads, whispers of disappointment and disapproval filling the air. The family's public reputation had collapsed entirely, their power diminished to irrelevance. Outside, the social media and media coverage amplified the story, ensuring that the collapse of the Kapoor family's influence was permanent. Authorities, tipped off by the evidence presented, began inquiries that would prevent any further manipulation or cover-ups. The consequences were no longer abstract, they were concrete, unavoidable, and just. Mira turned to Samir, her eyes softening but still filled with determination. "We did what was right, and we stood together. That courage has changed everything, not just for us, but for everyone affected by lies and manipulation." Samir smiled, pride shining in his eyes. "You were fearless. We both were. And we've proven that truth and courage are stronger than fear." Arun, realizing the depth of their defeat, finally lowered his gaze. "We underestimated you," he admitted, voice quiet, almost a whisper. "We didn't expect anyone to stand up against everything we built." Mira nodded. "And that is the lesson. Power built on deception and intimidation can never withstand courage and honesty. Every action has a consequence,
and today you faced them fully.
The room seemed to exhale collectively. Relief, triumph, and understanding mixed in the air.
Guests embraced one another, sharing quiet congratulations, while those who had initially doubted Mira and Samir now recognized the power of standing up for truth. Outside, life continued, but the impact of the day would be felt far beyond the wedding hall. Social media posts, news stories, and personal accounts spread the lesson: truth, courage, and accountability always prevail when faced with manipulation and deceit.
Mira looked at Samir, a sense of peace settling over her. This isn't just about exposing the cappers. It's about reminding everyone that integrity matters.
Lies and manipulation may seem powerful, but they crumble under courage and truth.
Samir nodded.
And it's a lesson for everyone to stand up, speak out, and never let fear control your choices.
The wedding hall, once a stage for humiliation and conflict, now symbolized justice, courage, and the enduring power of truth.
The storm had passed, the battle was won, and the moral of the story was clear: honesty, bravery, and unity could dismantle even the most entrenched power. The Kapoor family had faced their final reckoning, and Mira and Samir's unwavering courage had changed the lives of everyone involved, forever. The storm was over, but the lessons would remain.